Today's episode brought to you by Conduit Clothing Company, conduitclothing.com, where you asked and they listened. They have some new exciting offerings at conduitclothing.com, including for the women, a new super soft cropped top hoodie, as well as new women's V-neck shirts. Also for the men, they've added a couple of different colors of the soft V-neck t-shirts. You're going to love those. As I always say, when you feel the quality of the clothing in your hand, you're going to want to wear it, and once you do wear it, you're going to want to wear it again. Plus, the evocative Conduit Clothing logo is sure to fire up some spiritual conversations. That's why every order comes with a hardcover ESV Bible. ConduitClothingCompany.com is where you can go to check out their catalog of clothing, and you can also find out what it means to be a conduit for Christ. ConduitClothing.com, sponsoring today's episode on the AM Update. It's Monday, October 13th, 2025. Trump's Berlin Wall moment could happen this morning. China goes nuclear on trade, and even left-wing media has to admit something. That's next on the AM Update. President Trump is in Israel as we speak to commemorate and to be there for the transfer of hostages from Hamas back to Israel and prisoners from Israel back to Gaza. Israel expects all 20 living hostages to be released by Hamas this morning. The bodies of the deceased hostages will be placed in coffins and brought to a forensic institute for identification. As I said, President Trump is in Israel right now. He left for an all-day flight yesterday from Washington, D.C., landed in Tel Aviv, and gave a speech to the Knesset overnight. That dude just keeps an impossible schedule. So this is shaping up very much to be his Berlin Wall moment. I cannot believe we're even at this point, to be completely honest with you, when it comes to Hamas, Israel, and their peace agreement. I just cannot believe, based on what I saw from not that I didn't think it was a great proposal, I just never thought Hamas would ever allow themselves to look weak. And they do in this circumstance. Any form of capitulation whatsoever makes them look weak. But they got the job done. It's incredible. You just have to tip your hat at some point, regardless of what you think of Trump, his administration, his employees working for him in the federal government, at least when it comes to the State Department. He's just got something about him. He knows how to make a deal. And at the White House on Friday, he actually highlighted an important and crucial statistic when it comes to the conflict between Hamas and Israel.
Don't forget, you had October 7th, which was a horrible day, 1,200 people killed. But Hamas has lost 58,000 people. That's big retribution. That's big retribution. People understand that. So, no, I think they're all tired of fighting, and this really gives the whole Middle East. This is beyond Gaza. Gaza is very important. But
so there's President Trump revealing that Hamas lost 58,000 members in this conflict. The total death count is expected to be somewhere around 67,000. Let's say those numbers are exaggerated by double. That would mean the militants to civilians death ratio was way, way, way below the UN average. I mean, it's just completely unprecedented. Completely unprecedented when you look at what they actually had. This is not fighting in the mountains. This was fighting in urban warfare. That is incredible. So it looks like this thing in Israel, between Israel and Hamas, is winding down. We'll see how long this peace actually lasts. Part of this plan, the part of this plan that I thought would be the biggest hang-up is that Hamas has to agree not to seek leadership positions in this newly formed government for Gaza. We'll see if they actually stick to that. Back at home, the shutdown continues. Vice President JD Vance went through the car wash on Sunday morning news programs about the ongoing government shutdown. He even made one stop with George Stephanopoulos on ABC News, and George didn't want to talk about anything other than some weird Tom Homan story.
I don't know what tape you're referring to, George. I saw media reports that Tom Homan accepted a bribe. There's no evidence of that. And here's, George, why fewer and fewer people watch your program and why you're losing credibility. Because you're talking for now 5 minutes with the Vice President of the United States about this story regarding Tom Homan, a story that I've read about, but I don't even know the video that you're talking about. Meanwhile, low-income women can't get food because the Democrats and Chuck Schumer have shut down the government. Right now, we're trying to figure out how to pay our troops because Chuck Schumer has shut down the government. You are focused on a bogus story. You're insinuating criminal wrongdoing against a guy who has done nothing wrong instead of focusing on the fact that our country is struggling because our government's shut down. Let's talk about the real issues, George. I think the American people would benefit much more from that than from you going down some weird left-wing rabbit hole where the facts clearly show that Tom Homan didn't engage in any criminal wrongdoing.
It's not a weird left-wing rabbit hole. I didn't insinuate anything. I asked you whether Tom Homan accepted $50,000, as was heard on an audio tape recorded by the FBI in September 2024, and you did not answer the question. Thank you for your time this morning.
No, George, I said that I don't.
And we're cutting to break. There's George Stephanopoulos. Oh, I can't say his name. George Stephanopoulos. Trying to change the subject from anything other than the ongoing government shutdown, because, I mean, if you wanted proof positive that this is going against the Democrats right now, George Stephanopoulos just gave it to you, because he's wanting to talk about anything other than the government shutdown. Hey, let's talk about this Tom Homan story that conveniently dropped just when we were absolutely getting pilloried because one of our left-wingers shot Charlie Kirk. By the way, yeah, there's a reason I haven't talked about that story at all. There's some weird story about Tom Homan accepting some sort of, I think, a payola type of thing. It's just, the timing was iffy. The facts were iffy. You just heard George Stephanopoulos say there, well, it was heard on some sort of recording by the FBI that he accepted $50,000. I mean, there's like 15 different layers of stupidity in that story. And that's what George Stephanopoulos wanted to talk about with JD Vance on Sunday morning. And when Vance called him out, he couldn't wait to cut to break. Well, this was an underreported story until President Trump blew it up late last week. President Trump said on Friday the United States would impose new tariffs of 100% on imports from China over and above any tariff they're currently paying. And Trump also said the U.S. on that same date would also impose export controls on any and all critical software. The president's announcement came hours after he threatened to slap a massive increase on tariffs on Chinese imports in retaliation for new controls that China imposed on exports of rare earth minerals from that nation. Around 70%, of course, of the global supply of rare earths minerals comes from China. The minerals are essential for high-tech industries, including automobiles, defense, and semiconductors. Essentially what China tried to pull late last week. And it sounds like they're starting to back down and clarify what exactly they were doing with their export controls. They were trying to basically, on any product of import that has any level of modern technology, China was trying to say, nope, you can't produce that unless we say so. Because they have a stranglehold on that supply of rare earths. That's what they tried to pull late last week. The backlash was pretty extraordinary. The original story did not get reported too much, but Trump, as I said, blew that out of the water. Sounds like China is starting to capitulate. Here's U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer on the ongoing back and forth on the trade war between the United States and China.
They're going to be impacted by this. The Ministry of Commerce posted overnight, China's export controls are not export bans. Licenses will be granted for eligible applications. Before the measures were announced, China had already notified relevant countries and regions through bilateral export control dialogue mechanisms. I assume the U.S. was not notified since the president said this came as a surprise. But how do you read this message? Does this look like a walk back to you guys?
Well, clearly the Chinese have realized that they have wildly overstepped the bounds of what's acceptable. I can tell you that we were not notified, and quickly, as soon as we found out from public sources, we reached out to the Chinese to have a phone call, and they deferred. However, in the past couple of days, I think it's become very clear to everybody that this power grab by the Chinese won't be tolerated. So I think some of this messaging has signaled that they understand that there's a serious issue here.
So, sounds like the White House is not as concerned as they were late last week regarding China's attempt to basically have a say and put the kibosh on any level of manufacturing of technology, modern technology. I don't know how else to put it. That's what China was trying to do last week. Any trace amount of any element that is considered a rare earth material or mineral, China said we have a say on whether or not you can produce that, regardless of where it's produced. Unbelievable. The families of 16 victims killed in the devastating blast at a Tennessee explosive plant have been notified, authorities said at a Saturday news conference. No one has been found alive in the search, and investigators are working through the scene foot by foot. Earlier, officials thought 18 people were missing because their vehicles and personal items were at the facility, but they were later able to locate 2 people off-site. On Friday, the explosion occurred at Accurate Energetic Systems and flattened a building on its 1,300-acre campus. Rescuers had to keep their distance for hours due to burning debris and risk of secondary blasts. The smoldering wreck could be seen in aerial footage as well. Company website said it processes explosives and munitions for the military and aerospace and commercial demolition industries. Its facilities has some 8 buildings in a wooded hill area near the town of Bucksnort, some 60 miles southwest of Nashville. So, randomly, a munitions and explosions or explosives company for the U.S. military, that's what it sounds like here, randomly gets exploded on Friday morning. Seems suspicious to me. When we come back, where you've got a Who Will Pick the Cotton update, but from a source you might not expect. Also an update to the story we had last week about that dude who is out back on the streets again after stabbing a 6-year-old. There's some good news where that comes into play. And there's a new message, a new talking point that just dropped. We'll talk about all that and more coming up next. I want to remind you today's episode brought to you with limited interruption by Conduit Clothing Company, where their entire goal is to get a Bible into the hands of as many people who maybe need one as possible. That's why every order ships with a hardcover ESV Bible. Every order including some of their new offerings, like for the ladies, the new super soft cropped top hoodie, especially as we're getting into the winter months. Evan, our friend over at Conduit Clothing, sending Bella and I a couple of hoodies. I'm not wearing the crop top, of course. That might be for my wife, but I can't wait for those to get here. And I love rocking the Conduit Clothing logo all over town. I mean, it's just cool. It's a Christian clothing company with a cool design and an even bigger mission. Find out what it means to be a conduit for Christ at conduitclothing.com. Conduitclothing.com.
Bring them all the way back.
I don't know if I do.
Keep coming back. Put your hands behind your back, Ronald.
Yes, sir. What's going on?
The man who stabbed a 6-year-old to death and was released from prison early has been rearrested in Florida near an elementary school. Ronald Exantis was convicted in 2015 after stabbing Logan Tipton so hard in the head with a butcher's knife that he had the knife bent. The Marion County Sheriff's Office says they arrested Exantis near Sunrise Elementary School for failing to register as a felon as required by Florida law. Exantis was discovered living in a home adjacent to the elementary school and blocks away from another school. You'll recall last week, myself and there were others, most notably Matt Walsh at the Daily Wire, who drew attention to this story. Just a terrible, heartbreaking story from Kentucky about a family fast asleep at night. A man breaks into their home, just decides to stab a 6-year-old in the head, killing him, murdering him. And because some jury somewhere decided that this guy, Ronald Exantis, was insane, he got out of jail early. I think that's how the story goes. Now he heads back to Kentucky, hopefully to be put away for life after he was arrested in Florida. So good on Florida for tracking this just cold-blooded killer down. And hopefully Kentucky will do the right thing. Well, we've got a Who Will Pick the Cotton update, maybe from a source you might not expect. Here's Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene.
As a conservative and as a business owner in the construction industry and as a realist, I can say we have to do something about labor, and that needs to be a smarter plan than just rounding up every single person and deporting them just like that.
Right.
So, and I'm going to get pushback on that, but I'm just living in reality from here on out.
Yeah.
And if anybody's mad at me for saying the truth, then I'm sorry.
Marjorie Taylor Greene, ladies and gentlemen, our next.
Yeah, Marjorie Taylor Greene with a Who Will Pick the Cotton update. I'm just living in reality. Yeah. Oh, I believe you. It has been reality that, you said you're involved in some sort of construction industry. It's been the reality that you could just You could just pick up some illegal workers. Good workers, probably. Hard workers. Maybe not skilled, but at least show up for the job and pay them pennies on the dollar of what somebody who is an actual citizen, tax-paying citizen of this country, you would have to pay them. Yeah, that's been the reality. And the reality is that's been so much the reality that it's the norm. And breaking away from that norm is going to be very expensive and very inconvenient for people like Marjorie Taylor Greene. So I actually like the plan of just rounding up every single illegal alien and deporting them. That sounds like a pretty smart plan to me. And it's up to the people, the business owners who have been taking advantage of illegal alien chattel labor. It's up to them to figure out what to do next, because they have been benefiting, the primary beneficiaries, other than the illegals themselves. They have been the primary beneficiaries of the system. So it sounds like it's time for them to have some smart plans, because the government's just doing what it should be doing, which is upholding the law. Well, you might have seen this story. Dominion Voting Systems. It's the voting machine behemoth that President Trump and his allies have been very critical of for years in the aftermath of the 2020 election. Dominion Voting Systems has been sold to a Missouri-based company run by a former Republican election official. Dominion is one of the biggest election equipment providers and was used by 27 states during the 2024 election. Liberty Vote purchased the Canadian-based Dominion Voting Systems for an undisclosed sum. Liberty is a new company owned by Scott Leindecker, who in 2011 created a software program focused on enabling election workers to verify voters and check them in polling locations. According to Leindecker's LinkedIn page, his company, No Inc., has more than 150 employees and $55 million in annual revenue. That's a twist I did not see coming, especially given that Dominion has successfully sued entities like Fox for just ungodly sums of money. You'd think that they would be not for sale, something like that. But apparently they were. And now a former Republican election official, is in charge of Dominion Voting Systems. Isn't that interesting? Well, how much different is the southern border? NBC News, left-wing media, sent a reporter down there last week to check on Eagle Pass, the infamous Eagle Pass. Just how much have things changed? Listen to this.
Trump says he secured the border.
Nobody's coming into our country now. We have the border totally stopped.
We're here in Texas to see what those changes look like on the ground.
We've got the most controlled border we've ever had in the history, and in my lifetime in the Border Patrol, and we're going to continue getting there.
In Eagle Pass, Texas, during the Biden administration, more than 2,000 migrants crossed into the U.S. in a single day. But now, under President Trump's policies, officers encounter just 20 migrants a day here. So the last time I was in Eagle Pass was 2 years ago, almost to the date. And I saw more migrants crossing at a single point in one day than I had in, at that point, 9 years of covering immigration. They were cutting through this barbed wire here and coming across the Rio Grande, sometimes with parents holding their children on their backs as they crossed the water. We saw a lot of rescues. We saw people bleeding as they came under this barbed wire right here. And then we saw hundreds gather under a bridge. They were taken in, processed, and then released either to ICE or elsewhere to pursue their asylum claims. Now it's a total change.
People aren't taking that risk to come across because the end of catch and release is a deterrent in itself. And then with the level of prosecutions we're doing for smugglers and for those entering the country illegally, you add that added deterrence.
We've been out here half the day now, haven't seen a soul. We patrolled the river, haven't seen anyone there either. What we're seeing and what we're hearing from the Border Patrol chief and the agents on the ground here is that anyone who crosses now is arrested, prosecuted, and turned back over into Mexico. You simply cannot cross through here anymore and claim asylum, no matter what your claim is.
So there is NBC News, left-wing media. Their reporter Julia Ainsley went down to the southern border, the infamous Eagle Pass, Texas, and said unequivocally, it is night and day. We didn't see a soul here. The last time I was here, you could see nothing but souls trying to cross this border. And it is completely different now. Paging Senator James Lankford from Oklahoma. You complete and utter buffoon. Nearly Actually, you did hand the Democrats their biggest talking point on their worst issue in 2024. You remember when he tried to sponsor that legislation that Democrats said, oh, this is going to enable us to shut down the border because we can't do it right now. James Lankford was the one who was pushing for that. The Republican senator from the reddest state in the country, Oklahoma. I mean, what a piece of just a worthless individual. Totally worthless. So, there's that. And finally, air analysis, slightly acidic, mostly necessary. New talking point went out. Check this out from Grabian Media. Listen to this.
There's no Antifa. This is an entirely imaginary organization. There is not an Antifa.
Like, I don't even know what Antifa is. There is no group.
It's not even like far-right groups like the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers. Compared to right-wing extremists, Antifa-linked violence is rare and limited.
It isn't an organization. It is a in many ways mythology.
It's not like the Proud Boys or the Oath Keepers, sort of defined terrorist organizations with leadership that leads violence.
It's not a highly organized movement. It's a moniker. It's not a unified group like the Proud Boys are.
Things like Antifa are things that are thought up.
It's all in this guise of going after Antifa, which is nothing. There's no organization called Antifa.
Nobody's a member of Antifa because it doesn't exist. They are just declaring into existence something that doesn't exist.
There is no Antifa organization, so maybe that's good for social media, but it really is non-existent.
They exist on the internet in chat rooms and in 4chan and Discord and places like that where they run discussion boards, trade tactics, documents, things like that. But none of them are called Antifa.
So that is a montage courtesy of Grabian Media of different talking heads on the left, different politicians on the left, what have you, saying almost in unison, there's no such thing as Antifa. There's no such thing as Antifa. You heard Congressman Goldman there. You heard What's-Her-Nuts from CNN, although there's a lot of What's-Her-Nuts on CNN.
There's no Antifa. This
Chuck
is an
Todd,
entirely imaginary
Jimmy
organization.
Kimmel,
There is not an
the voice you heard this just there. You heard Joy Behar. One voice you did not hear, though, is one Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison, who said very much the same.
So the fact that there is no, nobody even knows what it is. The first person I ever heard use the word Antifa was Donald J. Trump. When he was going on about how there were good people on both sides at Charlottesville. That's the first time I ever heard anyone use the term. So now it's this amorphous thing, and if nobody's really Antifa, then everybody could be. And the reason you can't find them is because they're just that crafty.
So there's Keith Ellison, Minnesota Attorney General, saying much the same thing. There's no such thing as Antifa. Problem is, a few years ago, there's a picture of Keith Ellison holding up Antifa, the Anti-Fascist Handbook. It's a book written by Rutgers professor Mark Bray. And there's a picture of Keith Ellison holding that book up, taking a selfie with that book. And here he is a few years later saying there's no such thing as Antifa. So why do you think it is? I think it's pretty obvious. Why do you think it is that all of a sudden this talking point is the exact same? Because they all know it's not true. Anytime lefties all are saying the exact same thing in accord with one another, the exact opposite is likely true. They lie. They lie and lie and lie. And when you find a bunch of them saying the same thing around the same time about the same topic, you know the opposite is true because it's a lie. And I think they're scared. I think they know that Antifa is in danger. That book that I mentioned, Antifa, the Anti-Fascist Handbook, written by that Rutgers professor, Mark Bray. Mark Bray has fled to Spain from the United States, saying he fears for his life. So, not only do we have the joint terror task forces at work all over the country now, President Trump late last week designating Antifa as a foreign terrorist organization. It seems to me like the Trump administration knows what time it is, at least with this organization. And I think lefties are starting to get afraid and scared. As we talked about with my guest Kyle Scheidler on Friday, yes, it's hard. Antifa is set up kind of like Al-Qaeda, just this kind of disconnected group of trained cells, kind of can operate independently. That doesn't mean it can't be defined as an organization for the purposes of enforcing law. So, in case this becomes a thing over the next few days, few weeks, in case this becomes a talking point that has more legs than just kind of a temporary in one news cycle, out the other type of thing, just know that it seems like the left is really fearful that their shock troopers, their stormtroopers, they could be in danger of going bye-bye. I pray that their fear is not misplaced. That's going to do it for a Monday. Back at it again tomorrow. I'm Aaron McIntire, and this is the AM Update.